Hello, everybody. My name is Christopher Wheeler, and this is Differentiated Instruction Dual Credit Playbook. I am currently the AP World History teacher at Taft High School and the Social Studies Department chair. I have a bachelor's degree in history from California State University, Fresno, and I am certified to teach composite social studies 8th through 12th grade. So on this slide, you can see this is my philosophy, and I have the differentiation isn't a strategy, it's a moral commitment. So what do I mean by that? So every student that comes into my classroom has a unique mix of readiness. They have different backgrounds, different potential levels. And so what I need to do is I need to kind of see where these kids are and then figure out how to push them to be successful. I can't just teach to the middle because I don't really believe that the middle exists. And so what I'm going to end up doing is I want to take a look at, do I have a kid who's coming in who can do primary sources like a pro, or do I have a kid who's learning how to write SAQs, DBQs, and needs sentence stems? And so wherever these kids are, it's my goal to push them to be able to get college standards by the semester's end. And if I don't use DI for this, what's going to end up happening is I'm going to have advanced learners that are just going to coast. They're not going to push themselves. They're just going to, kind of getting by on getting by. I'm going to have struggling learners that are going to drown, and those are the kids that'll end up being behavior issues and or want to drop the class or just quit, and we definitely don't want that. And so I've got to make sure that these kids are prepared. And so it's my job to put together the lessons and the activities along with the DI to help them be as successful as possible. I don't want my kids just to survive the class. I need them to thrive. Okay, so for this portion of the playbook, this was module 5 where we were asked to do an observation of an experienced dual credit teacher. Luckily for me, my wife is a dual credit teacher at Harlan High School here in Northside. She teaches dual credit slash AP US history stack course. So I was able to see a lot of what her and I talk about just kind of outside of work, actually in action. And so when I went in to do the observation, there were some things that jumped out right away. She had her kids set up in groups of 4. There were lots of directional material, whether it was posters or writings on the board to kind of help them. There were clear cut procedures on what the kids needed to do as soon as they came into the classroom while my wife was taking attendance, and then how they transitioned from the warm up activity to the reading activity they were doing about colonial economies. And so there was a lot of things that I saw in the early portion of that observation that I do already as an AP teacher at Taft. So I was like, okay, this makes me feel good that I'm seeing some of the same things. As I was watching the activities, what I noticed was that for the readings, depending on the groups that they were in, the kids had 2 different types of readings, and those readings were tailored based on what the kids' abilities were. So a little bit more challenging one for the kids that were, what we say the true AP kids or the true DC kids, and then there was another reading that was for the kids that were, struggling with, grasping some of the material. So I really liked how they did that. I also liked that they also had a choice on how they wanted to show the understanding of the readings, whether they wanted to do an infograph or they wanted to do a short answer writing, just depending on what each group decided. And really within the groups, they had the freedom to decide what they wanted to do or to not do. So that was kind of cool too. Um, Again, seeing the way that this was set up and knowing how I run my AP class, I felt real comfortable about when I do get to have DC kids. I'm already doing a lot of these things that an experienced dual credit teacher's doing, so it just gave me a lot of confidence that what I'm doing is working and will work when I get to the point when we have DC on our campus. As far as things that I would want to adapt for that lesson, I thought about group rotation, and that's something where whether it's you rotate kids while they're doing the lesson, or it's maybe just kind of a bit where they're in a group setting for one activity, but they're not in that permanent one. And there's pros and cons to that. And then the other portion that we talked about, which was I'm real big with using Google, but now that we, can't have the kids use QR codes with their phones because of the state laws, that's probably something that we would have to change. But other than that, like I said, it was a good observation. It was a positive experience, and it made me feel good that I was moving in the right direction with what I'm doing in my classroom when I was watching an experienced dual credit teacher operate theirs. Okay, so for the next portion of the playbook, this is module 8 where we sat down and we talked about planning with an experienced dual credit teacher. And so again, I went and had the conversation with my wife because she's an excellent resource for me. Excuse me. And we talked about in our conversation just kind of the diversity in our classrooms. So for the classroom that I observed in module 5, the class was probably 20 to 25% of the kids were struggling learners, and there's a variety of reasons why that is. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you have a smaller portion of the population that is the high flyers that know more than we do, probably, that love showing what they know to their peers, to their teachers. And then you have everybody else in between. And so, how do you push these kids to be the best versions of themselves and to be successful? And we talked about how that's through purposeful planning, that we have to plan the activities and the lessons with the end goal in mind and then work from there. And so everything that we do, whether we're writing DBQs or we're doing short answer questions or we're talking about multiple choice or we're working with primary source, whatever it is that we're doing, we have to make sure that as we're planning these out, that we have structured tiered tasks with the idea in mind of, kids A, B, and C are going to need this, but the rest might need something different, and just be able to have those things available for them so they can be successful. We also like scaffold supports. I do that a lot with my DBQ writing as an AP World History teacher. The kids write DBQs for the first time in my class, and so they need a lot of help because there's a lot of moving parts that come with the DBQ, the contextualization, how to write a thesis statement. We talk a lot about how writing in social studies is very different than what they're being asked to write in English, and how they're getting two contradictory messages. So it's important to have something on paper that they can follow so they can find some success. Speaking of success, the other thing we like to do is we like to make sure that they have options on how they want to show what they've learned, and whether some sort of choice board. So, like in the observation, they could make an infographic, they could write. Those are the things that we're looking at when we're planning. So it's incredibly important that when we use this planning time in class, that we're putting these DI strategies in, so that way our kids can access the curriculum and be successful. Okay, for this one, navigating roadblocks, which was module 9. There's a lot I could say about this, but basically the two areas that I want to speak on is one, just as a high school teacher, as an AP teacher, there's a big push right now to get as many kids as possible to take advanced academic classes. And with that push comes some real struggles. And one of the big struggles is going to be the gap between learners. Some of these kids are 100% ready to take on the challenges of advanced academics. Some of them are not, and it's our responsibility to get them to the finish line. So that's a huge challenge for us right now in the classroom. Another issue that dual credit teachers have expressed through conversation with me is about the gap between the high school expectations and the college expectations with Northwest Vista's policies. And there's a bit of a struggle that goes with this because when we're talking about this, a lot of times in high school, there's a lot of pressure on us to be lenient with our grading. And with college standards, they're a bit more strict. And so, as these AP teachers, they're caught in the middle between this because you have an academic dean saying one thing, but you have Northwest Vista saying something else. And it's difficult. There's been a lot of frustrating conversations my wife has had with me about just kind of how she feels about what's going on with this. The second issue is in regards to what's going on in the world and the House and Senate bills that are being passed. So on the one side, we're being told as advanced academic teachers, and I know for dual credit teachers as well, there are certain topics or certain issues that we need to cover. And while I agree with that, as as an educator, the flip side is we're teaching children. These aren't adults yet. And so there's a big push right now with, what we can and can't say in regards to like race relations and different diverse concepts. It's difficult because we're talking about the potential of losing our jobs if something is said that's wrong or anyways. So we really have to be careful about what's said. We have to be careful about how the syllabus is put together, and a lot of times we have to stick to what the state says is okay. And so a lot of times, unfortunately, if something comes up in natural conversation that may be a sensitive topic, we have to pivot away from that, because at the end of the day, we are responsible for our jobs, and this is how we provide for our families. And so there's just it's a complicated situation that we're in right now, and those were the two areas that I highlighted as the biggest roadblocks for us. Okay, so for the assessment and reflection, one of the things that I really wanted to highlight on this was the pre and post test, to track growth. And so for the testing itself, we use CMS, which I build my tests in that platform, and it tracks test questions for me so I can see, by TEK or learning standard just kind of how well we're doing, and it helps me as far as doing reteach, retest, things like that. So to me, that's probably one of the more valuable ones. The peer review conference, we don't have a ton of time to do those things. We do have something on our campus called Raider Time with our second period, where we do get more time with the students to talk about that. I wish that was something that I could kind of work in to do more, but I think getting feedback from students is very valuable as well. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the differentiated playbook, and how that aligns the T-test dimension 2.4, which is differentiation. And so there's a number of things that you do with DI that will help you hit proficient or accomplished, depending on your evaluator. The big ones that I take away from this is if you're using data to put together groups, that's going to be one of the ones that's going to hit for sure. So, like in my wife's observation, she had kids based on abilities that she used from pre-assessments and another data collection to put kids in appropriate groups so then they could get the proper scaffolding. Um, Also, providing choice for the students to show what they know, going back to my wife's observation where they could do the infograph and or the writing assignments is another way that you can score high in this domain. And then being able to provide feedback for the students, with the rubrics, having peer conferences, giving the kids any kind of post assessment conversation, and then just tracking that data and bringing that data with you when you sit down with your T-test evaluator are all ways that you can score high in this domain. Okay, so for takeaways, for what I want to do in my dual credit classroom, the number one thing on there is, I like to use data. Our academic dean's big on data and data driven decisions. So that's definitely something that I'm looking at, as well as gradual release scaffolding, which is something I already use. The second thing I talked about on here is going to be choice boards. I want my kids to have a bit more choice, so that's going to take a little bit more planning on my end. But I do like some of the technology components that I reviewed for one of the other activities in this class, and so I'm looking at Google Workspace or Nearpods for some of those pieces. And then the last one, which is pretty self-explanatory, which I've talked about a bit in this, is teaching to the middle, is something I want to avoid. I don't want to be that kind of teacher. I want to make sure that I'm challenging the high flyers and I'm pushing the kids that are new to AP to be the best version of their size. So no more of the one size fits all pacing. Those are the three things that I targeted for this. All right, so for the last slide here, preparing for excellence as a dual credit instructor, the first thing that I wanted to highlight was teaching self management. So for right now, I teach sophomores in AP World History, and a lot of times with our sophomores, they have trouble advocating for themselves. They have trouble meeting deadlines. They struggle with checking their own grades. And they rely on me as the teacher to tell them, "Hey, you're missing 3 assignments," or "Hey, there's a test, on this date, and I have to repeat it, even though it's written on the board and it's on their Schoology page." It's a skill for them. And the kids that didn't take AP Human last year are the ones that really struggle with this, because they're in an environment that's very different than anything else that they've been in. So the self management skills are huge. The second thing is going to be designing authentic assignments that mirror college expectations. And so no matter what we're doing, I want to make sure that there's a rigor piece that's there. But of course, with whatever we're working on, we want to make sure that there's tiered scaffolding. So sentence stems, open-ended prompts, whatever the kids need, so that way they're able to read academic materials, they're able to cite sources, and they're able to argue like a historian. And those things kind of tie into that third piece where we talk about embedding academic literacy from the first source. There's no busy work in the class. Like, everything has a purpose. I don't want to waste their time. I want to make sure that they understand that everything we're doing is purposeful to help them be successful on their AP exam or to be successful on the college standards that we are required to teach and hold them to.